Preparatory Office for the International Center for the Interpretation and Presentation of World Heritage Sites under the auspices of UNESCO. Pleasure to meet you all at the final lecture of the 2020 online lecture series on Understanding World Heritage Interpretation and Presentation. Highly appreciate you all for joining today's lecture, and we apologize for being delayed on live streaming the lecture today. The 2020 online lecture series were held twice a month since last September. Please check the videos of the lectures by Neil Silberman, William Logan, Shumai Huang, Vijay Jir, Peter Bill Larson on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Today, we will have a lecture with Dr. Gamini Wijesuriya. If you have any questions about the lecture, please leave comments on our YouTube or Facebook's live streaming video. We will have time for questions after having the lecture. Today's lecture is the final lecture for the 2020 online lecture series, but this is not the end of our lecture series. We will shortly talk about next year's lecture series at the end of today's event. Further information on the upcoming lecture series and the latest news of the Centre will be delivered through our Facebook page. Please take a look at the Facebook page of the Preparatory Office for further information. If you are joining the lecture on YouTube, you can find the link for the Facebook page on the description of the live streaming video. Now, I'd like to introduce our lecturer, Dr. Gamini Wijesuriya. Dr. Gamini Wijesuriya is a renowned heritage conservation and management professional with over 30 years of experience. He is known for his work on world heritage and pioneering work on living heritage and people-centered approaches to the conservation of nature and culture. Among his major contributions were the resource manual on managing cultural world heritage and over 150 missions covering nearly 50 countries for monitoring and training heritage professionals. Currently, he is a special advisor to the Director General of ICCROM, based in Rome, and a special advisor to the Director of WHITRAP, another UNESCO Category 2 center for training and research in World Heritage field. Also, he is an honorary senior lecturer of the Institute of Archaeology at University College London. Now, I would like to turn the table over to our lecturer. Pleasure to meet you, Dr. Gamini.
Thank you. Can I share the screen? Okay. Thank you, friends from all over the world and our friends at the Preparatory Office. I hope all are well and safe in your own respective countries. It's sometimes morning, sometimes evening, and so on. Thank you for the nice introduction, and also thank you for the invitation to speak at this inaugural event of the Center for Interpretation. I'm delighted to see that the interpretation theme has emerged within the World Heritage Discourse with the creation of a dedicated Category 2 center. This was a long overdue requirement. Thank you, Korea. The title given to me is Comprehensive World Heritage Interpretation. Of course, there are two subtitles: the significance of cultural landscapes and people-centered values, nature-culture linkages, both of which are very close to my heart. Before I start, let me thank two institutions I think the views or the perspective I will present today are my own, but I wish to note my gratitude to all these institutions for the opportunity they gave me to develop and consolidate these ideas. One is ICCROM, where I worked for 16 years, and the other is WHITRAP, and of course, Cultural Heritage Administration of Korea, where we were able to do a lot of work. All these have implications on my presentation. Since I'm the last presenter of the series, I would like to commend these excellent presentations by all the distinguished speakers. They covered definitions, principles, and contents widely. Therefore, I will touch on a completely different aspect, which is to make an attempt to position interpretation and presentation within the overall heritage management. Before, let me start with some of the themes discussed and the objectives of the center as a prelude to my presentation. What you see in the screen are several keywords which I like to recognize as people-centric themes from the previous presentations, of course, among many other ideas. I acknowledge them valid and relevant and appreciate the efforts made to highlight them, not just one, few of them. I'm of the view that these are essential ingredients for achieving credible results from heritage management and are already integrated into the broader heritage management principles and processes. These are thanks to some people like Professor Logan and Dr. Larson. However, I would not confine or frame them into separate interpretation silo or consider it as a stand-alone strand. I will explain them more in my presentation. I understand the reasons for considering interpretation as a standalone activity, particularly in relation to World Heritage sites for a variety of reasons. You know, World Heritage discourse is evolving over the last 48 years. Even the definitions of outstanding universal came to us only in 2005. Statement of outstanding universal value, which is the key to management of heritage, came only in 2008. However, I hope the work of the center would follow the recent trends of the World Heritage of trying to integrate divided domains, notable example in the linking nature and culture. These are the two objectives of the center: enhance the public understanding, seeking peaceful solutions. I feel previous speakers have sufficiently focused on the two objectives, particularly the second one, with the people-centric themes mentioned above. However, I personally feel that there is something missing. Heritage is what societies inspire, celebrate, and use, therefore decides to protect. As a result of which, majority of the sites, in my view, are conflict-free. In this context, I consider promoting well-being of people and planet through World Heritage could be a missing objective relevant to all the sites that can be aided by interpretation. Giving the cultural and natural heritage a function in the life of the community and acknowledging SDGs are relevant, as you all know here. Perhaps this is covered in the objective number 1. That is fine. I will discuss this further in my presentation. In these two general remarks, allow me to characterize comprehensive World Heritage interpretation and the ways to achieve the same, which will eventually serve the objectives of the convention. I frame my discussion around these two questions. What do I mean by comprehensive World Heritage interpretation? How do we achieve this comprehensive interpretation? In part one, I will discuss what do I mean by comprehensive interpretation. To be comprehensive, I will start with my conclusion here. To be comprehensive, interpretation should be an integral part of heritage management and shaped by all its fundamental principles and processes and aim at serving a widest possible array of audiences through diverse means. Let me break this into three key principles and discuss how I came to this conclusion. These principles were derived from the course on conservation of built heritage, which I helped to develop and implement at ICCROM. It took place 6 times since 2007, and 122 practitioners from over 100 countries have participated in it. It was developed within the ICCROM World Heritage Program and partially funded by the World Heritage Committee. The course aimed at providing a comprehensive understanding of the principles and processes of conservation and management of heritage by practitioners. In each 8-week-long course, 1 week was allocated to a module on interpretation, as you can see, within which we also discussed themes such as presentation and access. By the way, Tilden to Enam was a regular lecture during this course. The module followed 3 key principles, which are outlined here. Principle 1, Principle 2, Principle 3. I'm not going to read them because I will come back to them. I suggest these principles are important for comprehensive World Heritage interpretation. Let me explain them further. Principle number 1, interpretation should be an integral part of overall heritage management. Interpretation, because interpretation has a significant role to play in the management of heritage. It requires greater consolidation within the heritage management more broadly. It should not be regarded as a standalone strand. By introducing a module with significant proportion of time allocated, we aim to demonstrate that interpretation has a significant role to play in heritage management. By placing it at the bottom of the schedule, we aim to demonstrate interpretation requires greater consolidation within the management more broadly before discussing it. Also, it aimed at demonstrating it is an integral part of overall heritage management and not as a standalone strand. I know this principle is not new. This is already acknowledged in the document produced by ICCROM, its charter, and indeed this is promising. But let's build on it and ensure that such a fundamental principle is not confined to words. Let me go to principle number 2, which is interpretation is to be guided and shaped by a comprehensive understanding of heritage places and all principles and processes of heritage management, which means understanding the evolving nature of the heritage discourse is very important. Systematic planning, including engaging all audiences, assessment of all values, understanding sustainable development concerns. I do not wish to expand one by one, But in the ICCROM course, all these topics were discussed in the early stages of learning before entering the interpretation module. Heritage discourse has evolved considerably, having moved from mere Eurocentric, expert-led, material-focused, one-size-fits-all approaches towards values-led, people-centric by respecting and recognizing diversity and context and aim at delivering benefits to both heritage and society. This requires systematic planning, which among others entails engaging all audiences, including local communities and minorities, right at the outset to ensure collective mapping of values and their participation in management decision making. Values are central to the management of all heritage places, as much as outstanding universal value is central to the management of World Heritage. Therefore, we place greater emphasis on assessing all values. These principles and processes provide ample opportunity to discuss who should be involved and what issues should be discussed. These can include people-centric themes mentioned above, as well as new themes which should eventually shape and guide the final interpretation decisions. Let me give you some examples based on sub-themes given to me to demonstrate how those people-centric themes are already integrated and that there are more themes that need attention of interpretation. This is about cultural landscape. You know, concept of cultural landscape was a unique contribution of the World Heritage Discourse to demonstrate the evolving nature of heritage discourse. Among others, it has contributed to long-awaited expanded definition of heritage. It focuses on people, environment, and interaction between the two. The concept has expanded the audience considerably, including users and the population living and working, not just the visitors. Concept also relates to the livelihood of people, which include other issues such as their traditional rights, application of their traditional knowledge system. All in all, the scope and content for interpretation has expanded exponentially. People-centered approaches to conservation and management of heritage. People-centered approaches to conservation and management of heritage was initially developed by ICCROM with the aim of addressing some of the gaps existed in the conventional approach and as an extension to values-led approach. It derived from the Living Heritage Size program of ICCROM implemented from 2003, which promoted the recognition of the continuity and change as fundamental qualities to guide conservation, which in turn places people at the heart of the discourse. When placing people at the heart of the heritage discourse, we are confronted with a series of people-centric themes and values in addition to conventional ones such as authenticity, participatory processes, political context of heritage, social role of heritage, including livelihood, sustainable development, constructing inclusive and widely consulted heritage narratives, rights and knowledge issues, building community resilience, and recovery from conflict situations. Linking nature culture. Despite the good intentions of the creators of the World Heritage Convention to bring protection of nature culture under one umbrella, the two sectors worked in silos for 40 years. I hope you all will agree with me. However, since 2014, thanks to many initiatives, some of which I will explain later, the two sectors have begun to recognized the values of each other and has begun to recognize the interdependency of nature and culture and its implications on management, the need to recognize ecosystem services that bring benefits to both nature and culture, importance of sharing knowledge between the two sectors. By the way, I was told that interpretation came from the nature sector. Some people did not like. So these are some of the results. Now we are considering interdependency of sacredness and community, and I don't have much time to give you examples, and interdependency, ecosystem services, linking people and nature. These are some of the examples of the interdependency between nature and culture, recognizing natural values and cultural values themselves, and the interdependency bring new challenges in interpreting and presenting them for the benefit of all audiences. As highlighted by previous speakers, sustainable development concerns are now fully integrated into the operational guidelines, at least in theory. As you can see, many of the people-centric themes mentioned above are already recognized with a host of others. I know we all are working hard to achieve this. This is particularly relevant to the third objective I suggested. We believe heritage should and could contribute towards those pillars of the sustainable development, but at the same time, there is a need to demonstrate that this is possible through interpretation and understanding of heritage fully. I have quoted the fourth pillar in particularly, and the central figure is what we are dealing with in the UNESCO policy, human rights, equality, sustainability, and the fourth pillar talking about conflict prevention, protecting heritage during conflicts, and so on. This also shows you the themes that is proposed to deal within the sustainable development policy of UNESCO. I'm not going to go into details. And of course, this is a presentation from one of my colleagues, Sarah Court, who helped me to develop the people-centered approaches to conservation and management of heritage. And she has now prepared a program to review how heritage interpretation can support World Heritage properties in integrating sustainable development perspectives within. Of course, she has focused on Southeast Europe because the request has come from there. So I suggest these are some of the useful things to look at in the future. All these principles are already in official documents, you can see, including operational guidelines and those produced by the advisory bodies. However, I'm not suggesting that all this works perfectly within our sector, and agree we have a long way to go. Let me give you one example to demonstrate the challenges of working with local communities. This is well-known Bamiyan after destruction. How do we interpret this site? Local community considers these two majestic sculptures as lovers with local stories around. For the Buddhists elsewhere, they are some of the finest sculptures representing the Buddha with spiritual significance. Where do the interpretations stand? There was a discussion about extending interpretation issues beyond the nation states by one of the speakers. But what about the national sovereignty guaranteed by the convention? I'm not going to go into details, I'll stop there. All these suggest the importance of principle number 2 being followed at early stages. We suggest this on the firm conviction that the final decisions we make in respect of heritage management in general, including the interpretation, should be shaped and guided by them. Any effort made to understand heritage through a singular interpretative lens alone will not be successful in my view. Let me go to principle number 3, interpretation to deliver comprehensive results. Respecting or representing all values, catering to all audiences, not just the tourists or visitors, and explore diverse themes. This principle is directly relevant to the course module and the interpretation results expected. Since many of the speakers voiced on this, I do not intend to discuss this at length, but allow me to highlight one or two current gaps where certain values and audiences may be overlooked and where potential new ways to think may exist. This may also add my people-centric themes such as spiritual. This may also add more people-centric themes such as spirituality and pilgrimage and culture-specific solutions. Whether we like or not, there is a strong tendency to shape interpretation specifically for visitors or tourists to a site. What do you mean by visitors? Have you defined them? This is World Heritage Site of Anuradhapura, which existed as the capital of the country from 6th century BC to the 11th century AD, covering 14 square kilometers and 1,500 years of archaeological deposits. Some 90% of the visitors to this site are pilgrims. This exceeds 2 million on certain days. There are many such sites, not only this one. I had insisted pilgrimage to be discussed in the interpretation module of the course. Of course, we used the St. Peter's Church as a case study. But the word pilgrimage is completely overlooked to the extent of not mentioning in any of the doctrinal texts on tourism. In the past, I have argued that practice of pilgrimage has become a victim of modern tourism. Let me share an anecdote. Once I was invited to a meeting to discuss interpretation of an extensive so-called archaeological site. For me, it is not only an archaeological site. However, my first question to the well-respected interpretation planner was how many visitors you have to the site. She knew exact number of visitors, foreign visitors to the site. But I said, no, I want to know local visitors. She never had the answer, and the local people gave the answer and said it's about 100,000, which is about 10% of the people, and a lot of them are pilgrims. So the interpretation was going to be without considering them. The needs of these pilgrims and their interpretation requirements are different. But what have we done to address these differences? Pilgrims need to be able to understand the place and engage with the spirituality of site much more than understanding the total intellectual content. I guess there are more religious sites which are peaceful and could promote peace, which is the mandate of UNESCO, than there are contested or conflict sites in the World Heritage List. Unless we fully recognize and acknowledge the characteristics of and significance of such sites at the early stages of value assessment, we will continue to overlook them and focus on a level of interpretation that will satisfy only the scholars and tourists. In addition to conventional product, I propose and argue that conservation interventions can be powerful medium for site interpretation. Whilst archaeologists can interpret material remains of the past comprehensively in books and visual materials relation to archaeological site like this, I will explain later. Conservators can make these remains readable in situ for the visitors and users. This is an archaeological remain from Sri Lanka, 6th century. The first picture is when it was discovered. And this is a process that has gone through, and you can have different interpretation methods, but interpretation of a stupa in Buddhist literature, Buddhist culture, is that it should be treated as living Buddha. All the respect and honor that one pays to the Buddha should be paid to the stupa as well. So this is archaeologist's interpretation, but this is another interpretation, where people now gather in millions to worship, but not here. This, I know you will have many questions, but this is not the time for that discussion. And let me explain this via the example presented by two of our friends, Professor William Logan and Dr. Larson. This relates to the Temple of the Tooth Relic of Sri Lanka. Dubrovnik was the first World Heritage Site bombed in 1991, but the Temple of the Tooth Relic in Sri Lanka was the first World Heritage Site directly targeted and destroyed by a terrorist group, supposed to be the most ruthless terrorist group in the world so far produced. This is the most sacred Buddhist site for Buddhist, Sri Lankan Buddhists, and also for many Buddhists in the wider region. The temple was bombed in 1998, and terrorist group belonged to Tamil minority in Sri Lanka. This is just before bombing, and this was on the 25th of January. Let me stress that in the aftermath, despite the terrorist efforts to escalate tension between the Tamils and Sinhalese, those are the two ethnic groups, not a single stone was thrown at Hindu temples in Kandy or anywhere else. Also, it was a case where minority attacking majority's heritage. There were these stone sculptures in front of the temple, and we can see the extent of damage caused. There was a school of thought that believed the remains of the damaged temple should be left as ruins as a reminder of the atrocities caused by terrorists. As the conservator in charge, I did not agree to this and proposed a culturally sensitive solution that was fitting for such sacred site. There had been a number of discussions whether the terrorists are stakeholders, but I'm not going to go into that. I wanted to avoid creating animosity towards the terrorists or the ethnic group that they represented by the display of damaged parts. Also, I did not want to disturb the spirituality of the pilgrims entering the temple, which are thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands. This is the damage, this elephant, and this is after the bombing. We wanted to adopt the Buddhist philosophy of let go, or nahi verena verani, which is in Pali. In this world, hatred never ceases by hatred. It ceases by love alone. This is an eternal law, and let go is one of the most fundamental principles of philosophies. All the elements damaged during the past were completely reconstructed. This decision to reconstruct was shaped by the discussions on the entire recovery process. With this project, we were able to introduce the notion of living heritage, which led to the development of people-centered approaches at a later stage. While I was at ICCROM, someone contacted me and asked me, can you find me some examples of bullet holes, evidence of bullet hole in a conflict site? I didn't answer to that. On the other hand, in 2019 in Sri Lanka, following the Easter bomb attack of churches, when I was approached for advice regarding conservation of one of the sculptures that had been stained with blood, you can see this as a result of terrible event. I could not give the same advice to conceal it. My colleagues in Italy had told me it is normal to see blood or representations of blood in churches. So, reconciliation can be achieved in different ways, particularly through cultural sensitive, culture-specific approaches and different medium of interpretation. I trust I have explained the importance of principle number 3 sufficiently, and trust I also justified my conclusions of the meaning of comprehensive interpretation. Let me go to part 2 of my presentation. In part 1 of my presentation, I highlighted the importance of comprehensive understanding of heritage places and the need to follow principles and processes of management to guide interpretation. In part 2, how do we intend to achieve comprehensive World Heritage interpretation? My suggestion is let principles, processes, and tools develop for the cultural landscape, people-centered approaches, and nature-culture linkages to facilitate comprehensive interpretation of World Heritage. Perhaps I may be biased towards my favorite programs, but let me elaborate a little why I came to this conclusion. Programs on cultural landscape, people-centered approaches, and linking nature culture expand the scope of values and people-centric requirements in keeping with the objectives of the convention, thus leaving the mammoth task of interpreting them. These programs also pave the way for comprehensive approaches to management of heritage by evolving processes and principles respecting all values and societal requirements with a view to deliver credible results for both heritage and people. Interpretation should draw from these sources to improve its results. I'll go quickly into the same examples. Cultural landscapes in particular demonstrate the evolving nature of the discourse, expanded definition of heritage, looking at people, nature, and interaction, thus providing better tool to understand heritage. As you can see, the diagram, people-centered approaches to conservation and management of heritage has evolved in response to existing gaps to build comprehensive approach to management of heritage, focusing on all values without compartmentalizing nature, culture, tangible, intangible, etc., while placing people at the heart of the discourse. It pushes heritage and conservation towards contributing to well-being of both heritage and society by embracing the sustainable development paradigm. Although the cultural landscape concept aimed at considering nature, culture, and their interaction, the disciplinary politics was not successful in attracting the two sectors to work together. However, the program evolved since 2014, linking nature and culture has started a long journey. One of the key outcomes of linking nature culture program is the World Heritage Program, World Heritage Leadership Program, with the blessings of the World Heritage Committee. I'm presenting it here with the permission from ICCROM. The program aims to boost effective management of World Heritage sites, recognizing nature, culture, people by sharing experiences and combining tools developed separately with the intention of catering to all audiences. Under this program, it is expected that all relevant components, including people-centric themes, are addressed as an integral part of heritage management. Keeping that on top, and of course, interpretation can work here as well. I'm coming to end of my presentation soon. Give me 2 minutes. Most importantly, all advisory bodies are working together to improve management and develop necessary tools, as you can see some of the work in this screen. This is another historical moment where IUCN was invited to speak at the last ICOMOS General Assembly in Delhi, of which the main theme was heritage and democracy. The conclusions of the assembly endorsed the people-centered approaches. So all these things are combined together among the professionals, certain groups of professionals. People-centered approaches is gaining popularity worldwide and has become one of the key drivers for activities developed under the World Heritage Leadership Program. In particular, the training programs launched since 2015, as you can see some of the activities all around the world. So, you have seen my conclusions. I'm not going to read. What is comprehensive interpretation and how we can achieve them. And I will leave it for you to read it, and I will now stop here. And of course, with my little suggestion to include promoting well-being of people and the planet as a sort of important criteria. Thank you for the opportunity given, and thank you for listening.
Now you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can.
Yes, thank you. We highly appreciate for your insightful lecture, and our viewers left questions and hellos to you today. And now I'll read the first question. Here, this is the first question. The question was, I think it is practically difficult to reflect the full history of heritage. All the other stories about cultural heritage will not be equally appreciated, and there will be dominant values. In particular, the Heritage Convention has the characteristics of recognizing the representativeness of heritage. So, how can the World Heritage Convention reflect a comprehensive interpretation?
Can I answer?
Yep, that was the question.
I couldn't get it fully, but I think I agree. Thank you for the question, and I agree that you can't simply provide comprehensive understanding of a place of a place, and also to which people, because people have different expectations, different time period, different to allocate to a site visit. Some people have only 2 hours, some people have 1 day, some people have 3 days. I fully agree. And but having said that, World Heritage is some sort of representativity, but it is not necessarily the representativity. It only focuses on outstanding universal value. So just certain values will be out, and in management of a place and in interpretation, I think we have to make an effort to provide maximum. World Heritage Committee or the advisory bodies will not disagree with this. Even in the management process, we have virtually insisted, if you look at our manual and if you look at nature culture linkages programs, the World Heritage Leadership Program, we are suggesting understand and respect all values. I know you can't protect all values, at the same time, you can't interpret all values, but try and do the best to justify the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for answering the question. And Gamini, can you check the chat box of the Zoom? Yeah, I will send the questions through the chat.
Sure.
Great. So that you can understand the question a lot easily. Great, thank you. And would you wait for a second?
Sure.
And there's a question coming, but it is half cutted, so we will wait for it for a few seconds.
Sure.
And here's the second question. The question was, in order for heritage to integrate people-centered perspective, I think presentation strategy should be conducted. What do you think about it? Yep, that was the question.
It's not, I don't know whether something is missing here. If I understand, interpretation is more a process and presentation is more a product. So yes, definitely you have to, in the process, during the assessment, during the work of interpretation, you have to integrate people's perspectives, and they should be reflected in the presentations in a variety of ways. I agree, presentation has to be there, otherwise it's not end. The only thing we focus on interpretation, but for me it's a process, and the presentation is an integral part of it, as to the products of that particular discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you for answering the questions, and thank you for your questions, our participants today. And due to lack of time, I think that's all for today's Q&A session. And Dr. Gamini Wijesuriya, once again, we genuinely appreciate for your insightful lecture on World Heritage and World Heritage interpretation and presentation, especially on your experience regarding the people-centered interpretation. Thank you for it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I will leave.
Great. Now we have some news regarding the lecture series, as we announced at the beginning of today's lecture. If you missed the World Heritage Professionals lectures, you can rewatch the lectures videos on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. The recorded video of today's lecture with Dr. Gamini Wijesuriya will also be uploaded tomorrow. We hope the online lecture series offered you a great opportunity to listen to the speeches from the World Heritage professionals and share the latest issues on World Heritage in the COVID-19 situation. Today's lecture was the final lecture of the 2020 online lecture series, but this is not the end of our lecture series. In 2021, we will launch the next lecture series. For that, we would like to listen to your public participants' opinion. Please let us know your idea on the lecture series, such as what was good or bad, or the topic you want next year. especially in World Heritage interpretation and presentation. Please leave comments on the content we will upload on our Facebook page, asking for your opinion in a couple of days, or email us through the screen's email address. We appreciate all the participants for joining the final lecture of the 2020 online lecture series on World Heritage interpretation and presentation. I hope you all stay safe and healthy, and we will be back with new lecture series next year. Thank you for joining today's lecture. Thank you.